What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of ASAP, the Afrikan Social Activism Playbook. I am one of your hosts, T, joined as always by my sister, Michelee. And you know how we do every morning, we start off with our check-in. So how are you doing today, my sister?
I'm doing so very well today. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm excited about, everything we're going to get into today. Yeah, but I'm
Yeah,
feeling good. I've been going for a morning walk, every morning about 6 o'clock, and I'll go walk around for about an hour and a half or so. So
yeah.
I'm feeling, nice and heart healthy and everything. What about you? How you
Yeah, I've
feeling
been
today?
I've been doing the same thing since we launched the show, except for this morning I got up and I had some reading to do, and so I'll just have to take my walk after the show, and I have so
Yeah,
much other things to do, but I am excited about everything that we're working on and the opportunity to present just the information the way we do it every morning to people, and hopefully, they will continue to learn and engage, and we have some exciting things to talk about today, and some things that I think people are familiar with but don't know
yeah,
fully, like the details of who these people were or what actually it is that they did. So it's going to be, you know, a dope time. Yeah, so we can just jump on into our straight truth no chaser.
yeah,
For those of you who may not know, this is national news in the US, and it may, reverberate internationally as well, depending on how things go with the
yeah.
elections that are going on here. But Senator Kamala Harris is now officially the running mate of Democratic presidential nominee Uncle Joe Biden, who hopefully with I'm kind of, they've been saying for a while, people like Charlemagne the God and other people have been saying
Yeah.
that, they were leaning toward a black female running mate. And they even had Stacey Abrams as, a consideration. They had Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms as a consideration, which I thought was kind of odd. I always think it's odd when people already have a role, because it's like, are you just going to abandon that role? Like, for me, it's easier to replace a senator or a congressperson
Right,
because,
right, right.
they it's a group of people making those decisions. But when you
Mhm.
are like the mayor or the governor of a state or city, and you just abandon your post to go national, sometimes for me it feels a little disingenuous,
Right.
and I don't always like that. So Kamala Harris,
Mm.
who was actually an opponent in the Democratic primaries to Joe Biden, is now his running mate, which is not, odd, because that happens all the time. Because Joe Biden ran against Barack Obama in the primaries. Nobody remembers that
Right.
because nobody was paying attention to his campaign at that time. But this is something that happens in politics all the
Right.
time, and a lot of people have been saying that they believe that Kamala, she stopped her campaign early because she was already, being nudged in that direction by the party line. So, what are your thoughts about her and this
Mm.
decision that's come down?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really have a strong a very strong opinion on her, the situation. I just know basically my position is that, we have to definitely get the person in office out of office. And I mean, like, I know, everybody has an issue with, well, most people have an issue with her previous role, years back as
As a
district attorney and
prosecutor.
everything in California. And yeah, I was a prosecutor. And so I don't know, like she wouldn't be my first choice, but neither would Joe Biden. So I
Right.
mean, it is
I
what it
really don't
is
even
at this
know.
point. I think we can work with her though, and I think she's changed. I think she's made some progress. Still after
Yeah.
after those years, after that role, her part in it, I think she's made some changes. She is ranked, as like one of the most progressive senators.
Right.
When people talk about, for being progressive and everything, she seems to be, at the top of people's list. So I mean,
I'm
why not give
surprised
her a
that we
shot?
got here.
That's
It's
my
just
position.
odd because even when I voted, like I voted in the
Yeah.
primaries here in Georgia, and it was like they're already pretty much saying that Joe is the nominee, and all the other candidates by the time we voted were not even on the ballot. So I was like, what are we doing? Like, of course I was gonna vote because I believed
Right.
in vote on the
Right.
local elections, but I felt like a lot of my and a lot of it had to do with COVID and them moving the primaries, but even still, it just felt like my voice was silenced, and it wasn't even the type of voter suppression of I can't get into the booth because I haven't suffered that type of voter
Mhm.
suppression. But it was just like, bro, my
Right.
decision means nothing right now. They've already chosen who they're
Right.
going to
Right.
pick. And even with Kamala, right? So when she was running in the primaries, people kept bringing up, her past as a prosecutor, as the DA, California. But a DA, their job is to prosecute crime. So, some of those people that she
Right.
prosecuted were going to be black
Right.
people. So I just didn't understand how that was, being held against her. Because, in my opinion, kind of like what my opinion was on yesterday, with us wanting more police of African descent in the force, to try to have a little bit of empathy and understanding on that side. We can't have all black lawyers be defense lawyers. We need black prosecutors and black DAs so that when it's time to arrest some of these
Exactly.
police officers, somebody will actually go through with the indictment. As well as, if you've been to court, sometimes you'll get a cool DA and they'll say, look, we're not gonna try to give you the max, we'll give you the minimum. They control what is going to be presented to the judge on sentencing, because some of these people
Right.
are being sent up the river for crimes that they actually did commit. But sometimes people fall into a mess, or somebody's young. And if you have a black DA that understands, okay, this was a youth, a fallacy of youth. And so I don't want this to haunt this person's whole life. So as a
Right.
black person who is a district attorney, who knows all the rules and the loopholes that other young people of other ethnicities get a chance to not have, permanently ruin their lives, right? I can do that same thing for black people. So, it takes time to look at a person's record, but I don't think that her being a
Right.
prosecutor just outright should have been something that lambasted her, her candidacy. Because we pretty much, as black people, we can complain about Biden right now, but we went after Cory Booker and Kamala Harris harder than anybody that was running in the primaries.
No,
we dug so deep into them
I'm
more than
saying
we
though.
did
I'm
anybody else.
saying.
And now we feel like we don't have any options. And now it's like this apathetic march toward November. Like, all right, we'll vote for whoever to get Cuz out of office, but we're not excited about anybody. And it's primarily up to, us. We silenced our own voices sometimes because and I'm not saying don't be critical. I'm never saying that. Be critical. But there has to be code to this thing, right? So would we rather have Cory or Kamala or Joe? And we keep seeing Joe say crazy stuff in the news. Just like, was it a couple of days ago, Joe Biden was talking to some like he was talking about Cubans and how they vote. And he was like, you know, people might not know this, but the Latino community is very unlike the African American community. The Latino community is very diverse in thought and in how they think about elections and how they vote and it was like, okay, so what you're saying is Black people in America are a monolith. And there's really no reason to talk to us individually in our communities and all of the sort. So it's just, after he made that gaffe not too long, and it was due time anyway, but Kamala comes on and now she's drawing a lot of attention. So sometimes I don't know. It just seems like they're using this to create a narrative of, okay, now that we have this person, maybe the Black people will, be more excited, and really young Black people, because the older Black people are the reason that, Joe won Super Tuesday. Because if you looked at the polls before that, which is why I don't look at polls, because polls don't vote. It's like everybody was beating Joe. Everybody had a better campaign. Even Andrew Yang was making some progress. And then Super Tuesday came out and it was just almost a wash. It's like nobody else was even on any ballots. And a lot of, older Black people.
It's because he had the endorsement. Yeah, he had the endorsement though, being under President Obama.
Being tied to Obama, right? But Obama purposely didn't come out and support anybody, right? But having that tie already and that link and that name recognition as the VP for the Obama administration, it carried weight, even though he didn't say anything during the entire primary period. Like Joe just started talking after Super Tuesday. He wasn't saying much before that at all. And
I wonder, did they know? Did his team know? Because he seems to put his foot in his mouth a whole lot. And it's just like, somebody tell this man just to not say nothing. If they want this man, if we know we want Trump out, tell that man to close his mouth. Like, I don't care. I'd rather him just not say anything. And because there's also a thing with people I've been seeing now, where some people are going to be willing, as crazy as it sounds, they're going to be willing to just give Trump another try. Like, I'm literally seeing some people on my timeline, people that I know personally, talking about, well, why, going along basically how Trump said to Black people, well, why not? Well, because, and I've seen just different types of different justifications, like, well, we already know the devil that's in office, so why not stick with this one, because we don't know what the other one's going to bring. And it's like, y'all, I don't know, man. It's a lot right now, but we need to be more involved, like seriously involved. We're going to talk about it today, because we got some issues with our involvement and our lack of trust. It's been a lot of trickery, a lot of foolishness going on, and so we don't have trust in the system, in multiple systems. And just like you were talking about with Kamala, you were talking about earlier with Kamala, as a prosecutor, and thinking about that whole judicial system, and think about how, like, it seems to be like a cultural thing for a lot of us to be like jury, dodging jury duty. And we'll be mad at an all-white jury prosecuting people.
I've been looking for jury duty. I still don't understand why people dodge jury duty. First of all, but you get off work and you can be a part of you get a little stipend, you get a little food. But it's like,
I've always heard it growing up that people don't want to do, like, people,
it's always that narrative of, I don't want jury duty. Yeah. And I'm like, I've been a registered voter since I could legally do it. And I've never had jury duty. I'm like, where is
who appoints these people? Who chooses them? Like,
I thought it was supposed to be random, and randomly, I've never been solicited. That doesn't make any sense. And then, like I was saying earlier about the polls, people rely too heavily on those polls and believe the hype of those polls. But the polls are just people that they're interviewing, asking them on the street who they're going to vote
Yeah.
for. First of all, I've never been polled. I don't know where Gallup is, and I would like to, have my voice be heard in these things, but I don't know where those polls are taking place and who are they polling, because you get so wrapped up in that you forget people actually got to go out and vote. And who's to say that the people who they polled actually voted or actually voted the way that they say they were going to vote?
Very true.
So,
very true.
Like, those things can change. It's not like once you answer the poll, then your vote is submitted and you can't change it.
But it's just what? I wonder though if that is just knowing how we know how people work, how how different things work with people following just what everyone else is doing, because some people do rely on, like, even when we buy things, we relying on somebody else's reviews before we even consider buying stuff or trying things out. You rather hear what other people are saying. And I'm wondering, like, what if people just, a lot of people can get discouraged or just follow the tide. You know what I mean? If they see, well, the majority is going for this, so I'll just go for this.
That happens too, because they feel like, oh man, that person is polling at 1%. So I'm not going to vote for them, even though I agree with Andrew Yang's $1,000 a month policy. I was messing with him, like when Corey and Kamala were out. I was like, okay, I'm Yang. Like, give me that $1,000 a month, whatever. But by the time I even voted, he was no longer there. So it was just like, bro.
See, well, I've been for Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. Those were, my two favorite candidates the whole time, even from the last election.
Right.
And the issues that I ran into there, with other people, because of course, we discuss these things with our friends, colleagues, people that we're close to. And I was really upset. That really bothered me, because the most that people could say was that he was old. I'm like, look at who we got now. Look at who the next running mate. They around the same age. They in the same. So ageism was one of the things, right? Because it was like barely anything people could come up with. So it was talking about how old he is, and then it was a conversation that he has. I guess he was asked directly about reparations, but people weren't satisfied with his answer on it, because he gave answers on what he believes about reparations, about solving that issue and stuff. And it was through programs. I have my own ideas about how reparations could be, and it doesn't have to be just one one check or whatever. It can be through programs, through housing and education, all types of things. And so people weren't satisfied with his answers, and then all of a sudden it became, well, he doesn't even want reparations. So that doesn't mean that we can't get reparations just because he doesn't believe in it now. We don't know. I feel like it's like we're undereducated about how the whole political system works, and we feel uninvolved. We feel that we have absolutely no power, and we are not to be involved in that, because, well, what is it going to matter? My vote doesn't count. My voice doesn't matter. And it's like, y'all, so you just basically gonna forfeit any chance you have. You're just gonna forfeit it. You're not gonna take a chance.
Anybody who knows anything about Lyndon B. Johnson as a person, like, knows that he did not like Black people, but his policies were the most progressive out of any president that we have ever had. Like,
and how we get that done, though?
By pushing and pressing and having an agenda. So honestly, it doesn't matter who is in office if we have our agenda together, and the person is sensible and understands the job, which is why it's so dangerous at the current person who's in office. I don't feel comfortable that that person knows what they are doing in office, right? And so even if we had our agenda together, he doesn't play politics, and he just goes rogue and does whatever he wants to do. So that is the part, and he plays to his demographic, his constituents, and he doesn't play any middle ground. And it doesn't seem like there is any playing ball with that person. But any other reasonable politician will will look to,
Right.
okay, what are the people saying? What is being mobilized? Because it didn't happen overnight, those policies, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Bill and all those things. It happened because people had a singular goal, like a group of people had an agenda and said, these are our demands and this is what we're pushing for. And they had the legal backing, they had the people on the ground, they had the advocates on all levels, and people. I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson is the person who appointed Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court justices are lifetime appointments. So when you have somebody in office who is going to do that, this is why we don't need another so and so amount of years of the current administration, because they're not going to appoint a Supreme Court justice that's going to be favorable to the legal aspects of what we want to drive home. To the when we talk about police reform from yesterday, and we talk about setting precedent on what can be charged and who can be indicted and what is constitutional and what isn't. That's why we have to pay attention to these things, because we, and I blame us, we let it slip and we allowed Congress to play around with the Obama administration's time to appoint a Supreme Court justice. We let it slip away because they were filibustering, playing games, and we didn't do anything about it. We didn't step in, because as of the executive office, there was no other power that that administration could do. They were out of the loop. He made the appointment, he made the decision. Congress had to confirm it, and they didn't. And they tooted their thumb. They purposefully waited for his time in office to be over. It does not take that long to confirm a Supreme Court justice. They did not want the Obama administration to make a decision that was going to be a lifelong appointment, because there could be a Black woman on the Supreme Court right now. There could be another Black man on the Supreme Court right now. There could be, you know, how many other people. So these things right now are so important, and we have to pay attention. And like I said, we have to be critical, of course, but at the same time, we have to be sensible about, you know, how we criticize. What are we critiquing? You know, and then even so, what is our agenda and how are we going to present it so as to, you know, make sure that when we get whoever in office, we have our demands set and we have a collective voice. That's how people get stuff done. And I still think we need a lobby. We need,
that's what I'm saying. It's a whole system, and we'll continue to be pawns and be played with, not taken seriously. We constantly, you know, complain, you know, we moan about everything that's going on being done to us, but are we really serious about changing things? We have to understand, like, I can't stress it enough, because I see, you know, amongst my peers, I once felt, you know, similarly about just, you know, being frustrated with the system, you know, when I didn't know better. And like, you know, well, do we really actually have a voice, you know, because it seems like, you know, we put all this effort for, you know, trying to vote for someone, and then, you know, our vote never goes through, or we have all these leaders talking this and that, but then nothing ever really comes through for us, until I realized that it's a strategy. This is an actual game. You know what I mean? Like, we're speculating on the side while they're literally playing chess, and they're like, we are getting knocked off the board. And it's crazy because, like, have you heard of ALEC? You've heard of ALEC, right? The group, American Legislative Exchange Council. We're gonna talk about it a little later in the, because they were mentioned actually in the 13th you know, documentary. And the group, they are preparing, they're writing laws literally, right? These are politicians, state politicians, and corporations. When we wonder, you know, how things are tied up, they're supposed to be separate. You know what I mean? Like the government, the federal government, and states' rights, and all kind of stuff like that.
Exactly.
But these are people. They know the structure. They know the game, right? And so they literally write the laws. The state politicians, all they have to do is go up and present them as their own. They don't have to change a word, but they get these things done. They know how the system works. You know what I mean? Like they wrote the rules to it. They're going to continue to write the rules, you know. And so we sit back like, well, oh, we're just victims of it. When are we actually going to get wise, you know, to wise enough to know how to play the game? We can complain about how unfair it is, but how are we really interested in changing it? And that's the part that's like frustrating to me right now, because how do we convince people who don't have trust in the system, period? They don't trust anything. You don't trust the professionals who this is their profession. This is what they went to school to study, to what they went to school to study, and they're professionals in it. They work in this industry, you know, so we don't trust anyone. We
A
don't trust the
healthy
system.
distrust,
How do we participate?
a healthy distrust is important. It's good,
Hmm.
right? It
Right,
allows you
right.
to not be bamboozled. It allows you
Hmm.
to see when people are trying to pull the wool and the veil over your eyes. But you
Yep.
cannot allow that healthy distrust to turn
Hmm.
into a complete just apathy, right? Toward not
Exactly.
doing anything. Because what a healthy distrust does is it keeps you attentive. What
For
happens
sure.
is when you start to distrust everything and a distrust of even your ability to be a part of the solution, you start to be apathetic. And then
Hmm.
instead of being more active, you just fall all the way into not knowing anything and not being productive at all. And so
Right.
now your complaints fall on deaf ears, even to those who understand where you are coming from, because you're not doing anything to be a part of
Right.
the solution, especially
Right.
mine. Like when I just hear people complaining, I'm like, okay, are you complaining just to complain, or are you preparing to do something about your complaints? Because I really believe that if you see a problem with something, that
Hmm.
means that has been brought to your vision because you are a piece of the solution. You may not
Yes.
be the entire thing. You may need a group of people, but you have vision enough to see that something is going awry, especially in a situation where a lot of people aren't really seeing what's happening. If you can
Hmm.
see what's happening and you just sit around and you waste that vision that you have, you waste that forethought and you do nothing with it, then you're more useless than the person who doesn't see.
I'm telling you, like instead of people just thinking critically, because I totally agree with you. I feel the exact same way. You know, we should always challenge. I just actually commented on that this morning, earlier today, saying, you know, we should always think critically. We should always question, don't just accept what's given to you, what's told to you.
Right.
Always think critically, think for yourself. But instead of like a healthy, like you said, like just a healthy, you know, just people questioning about things, we just created a bunch of skeptics, cynics, you know what I mean? Like no one's believing anybody. You don't believe anything. We're at a point where it's like, well, people, we talked about it last week, talking about people being so woke that they need a nap. Like
Exactly.
it's a point where, you know, okay, we know that the government be lying, we know that politicians be lying, but
It's
guess
their job.
what? We have, it's their job. Like they're gonna try to convince you of things, but we have the power to at least place the right politicians. You know what I mean? In those offices. Don't just accept it. Don't just be like, well, they lied to us. Pick somebody though who you believe in, and
In
why
the
don't you
same
run?
way,
Why don't we prime our people? You know, let me ask you a question real quick. Because
mhm,
I think about it all the time. Because I love like mob movies for some reason. I know a lot of us do. But I love, like, because I like the organization. I like, dang,
Right.
they really be thinking about that, right? And so Departed is one of my favorite movies. I don't know how many times I watched that movie, but I love The Departed. And the part that really gets me, and it starts from the very beginning, is just the fact that they literally trained up somebody. They made sure the record was clean. They trained up their people to be in the right places where they need them to be at this point. Why have we not done that? Why don't we have, you know what I mean? Why are we not thinking? And this is even on a state level, because I'm thinking, like, for myself, now that I'm older and I'm like, definitely thinking more critically about things. And, of course, I like to talk about these things, and I like to research them and, look into them. And I'm like, dang, man, I wish, I could have been a politician or something, because I would have been one of them who would have been up there. Not to say that I
These
can't
are
now, ever, but I know I'd be torn down because people, how we be sometimes. But
these are the plays that we're talking about in the social activism playbook, right?
right,
So
exactly.
it's about bringing strategy back to
Yep.
our activism. It's about being
Mm-hmm.
strategic. And you say, why haven't we done this? We were doing it. We've
Yeah,
done
we
it.
were. Yeah.
We were
Right now.
doing it. Like, we have a history of, understanding how to be organized and how to strategically place people. There was a certain thing, like, I was watching, was it House of Cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the first season, that guy who Frank had manipulated, the congressman who was new,
Oh, right.
and he was
Right.
like from Pennsylvania somewhere. But those people in those unions, they picked him to be
Mm-hmm.
their, like, he didn't choose to run for office. They chose him
Yeah.
to run and made sure that he won. Like, we used to
Mm-hmm.
do things like that. You choose
Yeah.
somebody from youth, and they're like, okay, that's a smart kid. Okay, now we can get that person to
Mm-hmm.
always be a part of our interests, and we set that
Yeah.
person up to make sure that everybody around here knows who he is. This is the person that we are training up. This is the person that we're building to represent us on that other level that we need. And then when they get there, they understand that they didn't, choose to run. They didn't get themselves into office. And so they have, and the way that the representative democracy is supposed to work, it's supposed to be that way anyway.
Yeah. Right.
If we know civics, if we actually paid attention in class. But that's the thing, where we have the power, especially in the local elections, to choose. And Congress is still local, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate should be viewed as local elections, and they are in and out every 2 years.
Right.
And the reason that a lot of incumbents win is because people only vote every 4 years at national elections.
Mm-hmm.
And so incumbents just stay in and they just be riding. And after a while, when you see that your constituents aren't holding you to any accountability, to any responsibility, you just start chilling. You take your plush health insurance, you take your plush, you get to vote on your own raises in Congress. So who's not going to vote for their own raise? Like, that's the only time Congress, whether it's, partisan divided or whatever, everybody agrees. Oh, should we get a raise? Oh, yeah. And it goes,
Right.
That goes through with no arguments, no filibustering, no nothing. And so when those individual Congress people, especially the Congress, because they represent smaller districts, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the state, shows how many Congress people that state is going to have. Every state only gets 2 senators, but you can have as many Congress people as you want based on the lines in the districts that you create. And we all know about gerrymandering, and they just be, okay, the last time I voted, I was in District 12. Now I'm in District 8. I didn't move. The lines moved. And so it's just like all these things are always happening, and we aren't paying attention to them. So it's very important for us to know what's going on, especially in these elections. And then the reason that we're even talking about this on ASAP, right? We're talking about being strategic. And we know that the US has their paws in every country, every continent on this planet. So what happens with this election will be important to the rest of the world as well. Because I like to view this global news show, but this right here is important for us to know how these systems work, because the US is always trying to, push democracy on other people as well.
Right.
And I don't believe one political system is, the right way to go for everybody. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I want to stick to this theme, right? Because we try to make our show thematic, where, our straight truth, no chaser blends right into our highlight reel and our Monday morning quarterback, as well as our, the rest of the segments. So today I want to highlight, since we're talking about Kamala Harris being the first Black woman that is a running mate on a major party ticket, right? She's the Democratic projective nominee for vice president. We're going to talk about the first Black woman to ever run for president. Good old Miss Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was the first, right? So
Dr. Shirley Chisholm.
Put some respect on.
Doctor. Go ahead.
Tell them a little bit about Shirley.
Right. Oh yeah. So, like you said, Miss Dr. Shirley Chisholm, my soror, member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She was the first woman of color to ever, the first Black woman to, to be elected to the Congress, whatever, as a Democrat. And this woman, woo, fierce. Talk about a warrior, right? A social justice warrior. She fought for, for poverty, education, employment, and so she was definitely very well respected by others. Was unbossed and unbought and unbossed. I mean, this woman, oh my God, I'm really at a loss for words. Like it, I feel like I have her spirit in me. Just just how she was as a leader, how honest she was, and she was elected 6 times over in her position until she retired. So what is that, from 60? What is that? 68? What is that, to 72? She did run for president. I'm sorry, hold on. I'm a little flustered right now. Hold on. Yeah, she ran for president. The first Black woman to ever run, first Black woman to ever run for president. Yeah, you can go on and take over for me a little bit. I'm like a little. Hold on. I got some quotes for you. I want you to go on and.
I just wanted people to know just how involved she was. So, she spent a lot of her early, even though she was born in the United States, she spent a lot of her early years in Barbados, being educated there and seeing how life was there with the people on that island. And she brought a lot of that education and that world experience back with her. And she always had the advocacy and activism around her, because her father was a member of the UNIA and was a strong supporter of Marcus Garvey and in his movement. So advocacy for our people was very strong on her docket of things to actually to talk about, as well as, all the other things that Michelee was talking about. And Michelee is going, have you found the quotes?
Yes. Well, we have a quote that you're gonna have a
Yeah, we're gonna play some audio for y'all. You want to go into the audio first?
Yeah, because we gotta. It's some
Okay,
things I wanna. We definitely have to
we're gonna
touch
piggyback
on
off of.
along
Okay,
the lines of
great.
what we're discussing today, related to voting
So
and
here
everything.
is, here is Shirley Chisholm in her own words, so that you guys can hear just how powerful
Yes.
she was, and how she spoke to us and about us.
The whole question of the Rhodesian sanctions that everybody else is following except us. The whole question of South Africa constantly being ruled, a majority being ruled by a white minority, repression such as you've never seen it and never believed it in your life. And what do we do in the United Nations? We abstain or we vote negatively, and we espouse democratic principles. The hypocrisy. Now you can really understand why the corporate interests wouldn't back me, why the banking interests wouldn't back me. Do you see the interconnection? Therefore, you can understand why the establishment would never want to see a person like me in the White House. Because I tell you, the first thing when we get into that White House, if we have a commitment to the multifacetedness of America, the first thing would be it would no longer be the White House. It would be the polka dot house. The dream that everyone speaks about must become a reality, young people. Don't you follow what your mothers and your fathers and the older generation have been doing, constantly mouthing the words about the dream and not helping it to become a reality, young people. You're going to be taking over the guidance of this country in the future. Please have a gut commitment to the dream becoming a reality before it is too late. The time has come in this country when we must have a government that's reflective of all of the different segments of America. What's wrong with a black person for vice president, an Indian for the head of the Department of Interior, and a woman for the head of HEW? What's wrong with it? That is a multifaceted society. That is the dream come true.
See.
So, that's
That right
her.
there, though. Her
Yeah,
in her
that
own
part.
words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I really admired about her was just how bold she was, and calling out everybody. We all have a role in it. Like we've been talking about, like from last week's topics to to now, when we talk about politics, when we talk about just our position, we have a role. And I love how she really just challenged the young people in that speech. She was speaking at UCLA, right, to
Right.
students, to young people, and telling them how that, we have to be involved. We have to be directly involved. How do we change the system if we are not involved? We have to believe in ourselves, believe in, and be persistent. She even would say, when she would be interviewed and stuff about being, running for president, she was like, she doesn't even think that, she would actually make it to the office. She's like, I know I know that they don't want me in there, just like how she just said in the quote. But it was just the fact that it was like, I'm here, I'm going to speak, you know what I mean? She was for everyone. She literally spoke about everyone. She spoke about Native Americans. She was talking about people in South Africa, Hispanics, black people, everyone. She was really just an advocate, just like speaking for humanity,
Right.
and so I really admired her. And my thing is, like, how do we expect to change it if we are not directly involved, if we don't, actually actively participate?
I mean, she's the true definition of a champion, like we were saying the other day, like somebody who can identify is something only wrong because it's happening to me, or is it wrong that it's happening to anyone at all? Right. And so with her talking about other people's issues, is her addressing that this is wrong because it's happening to anybody. And I'm going to stand up and say something, even if I don't believe, or even if I know from being on the inside, like I barely got into Congress, and I'm going to step out and run for president, even though I know that, you know, even the party that I supposedly represent are creating barriers for me. I'm going to still stand up and make people take notice to what I have to say, because when you put yourself on that platform, people have to listen to you no matter what, you know what I mean? And so those things can still reverberate on into whoever does take office. And that's what happens a lot of the times when people who do end up being elected take tidbits and certain segments from their running mates. And her, you know, being of African descent and talking about the Rhodesian conflict, talking about apartheid, talking about the economic investments of the United States in those places, and really stepping out on the forefront of, you know, putting the US on the hot seat, right? And that could have been dangerous as well. And it could have ruined her political career. But that wasn't what she was about. She was about, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I believe. This is what I'm going to, you know, speak to. And I'm not going to allow any other obstacles to stand in the way of what it is that I want to represent and how I want to, you know, be represented, or how I want my legacy to be remembered. And it's just dope. I love anybody who can actually stand up, because we see so many people compromising themselves because, oh, I don't want to ruin my career. We see people compromising themselves over so many things, over the most minute things. People who've already secured a position, they still will compromise themselves. And it's like, what are you, you know, what more do you need to gain? Or, you know, do you feel like that everything that you have gained is going to be snatched away from you? And those people, when they do that, then, you know, we know where they are. We know where they stand. But for the people who are really with it, like Dr. Shirley Chisholm, she was somebody that should definitely be spoken of more. I mean, we hear about her in like the Black History Month type education that we get about all of the firsts. Like, there's a whole book about Black firsts, like the first Black person to do this, or the first Black person to do that. And so that's pretty much her note in history. She was the first Black woman elected to Congress. She was the first Black person to run for president, you know, on a major ticket, on a major political party. But that's it. That's all we hear, is that she was the first, and then they move on, you know, to the next thing, which is why we always slow down in this highlight reel. We highlight the person and everything that they actually did and spoke to. And it's not a speck in a encyclopedic length history book where, okay, I know that person, and it's not just an answer on a test. It's somebody that you need to know. You need to know her legacy. You need to know what she stood for, how she spoke to people. Like, how many people, you know, watching this, is that your first time hearing her voice, like hearing how powerful that she spoke? And that's important for us to know. That's important for us to take and say, and take ownership of, our own education and how we speak about our own heroes and heroines. Any last words on Dr. Chisholm?
Right. You hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah. I was saying, do you have any last words on her before we move on to our Monday morning quarterback?
Hello?
I got you. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry, I lost your connection for a little bit. Okay,
Okay, you lost me.
okay. I hear you now. Okay, we on now. You said
Okay,
my
cool.
last thoughts on her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, she was definitely about that, like you said. And one thing also was that like she also called out politicians, even black politicians, who may have
Right.
been taking advantage of people after um after they were elected. And so she was just really about everything that she spoke about and really bringing that to the light, bringing that to people's attention. And, basically how we were talking about being critical of who's in office and what we're actually going for, what we want. And so she made it like okay for people, like letting people know that it was okay to question, to challenge, and really just be directly involved. So that's how I was really inspired by her. Learning about, I'm still learning new things about her now.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing,
Yeah,
listening
me
to a
as
lot of her
well.
speeches. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot that we can take. It's a lot that we can, yeah, we can take a lot from her.
Yeah, because unfortunately, like I was just saying, she was just a note in history as a first, right? And we didn't really learn any details about who she was or what she represented or
Hmm.
how powerful she was. And that is representative of a lot of how we learn about ourselves in this formal education from over here, as well as me speaking to my compatriots across the diaspora. That's how we all learn about ourselves, whether it be in Africa, them learning about us or them learning about, African history. Sometimes it's a footnote. Sometimes we're a footnote in our own, Afro Latino community education, as well as in the Caribbean. We learn a lot about the people who colonized, but not enough about who we are and what we've
Right.
done. And and what it does is it allows us to not really appreciate everything that we've done and to think that we have to reinvent the wheel and to think that it's the first time, and it can be discouraging. But when you know that you're building on the shoulders of people who came
Hmm.
before you, who have done great things, you're
Yep.
more encouraged to continue to do great things. And so that is what this show is. African Social Activism Playbook is about creating those plays, as well as revisiting the plays that have already been laid out and putting them into action again, like recycling
Hmm.
those plays that still work. So our
Hmm.
Monday morning quarterback, and the reason that this is important to this conversation, because we were talking about Kamala Harris, we were talking about Joe Biden, we're talking about Shirley Chisholm, and we were talking about how in 2020, 2019, this whole election cycle, we in the Black community have been talking about our vote and what our vote represents and wanting a Black agenda to specifically be addressed. And one of the main issues that has been coming up that has never really died in the Black community, but has been coming up more
Right.
on a national level is the argument of reparations. Reparations for people of African descent who have descended from enslavement, who our ancestors were those Africans who had been kidnapped and enslaved for generations and thus forth and so on. And so I bring up the 40 acre documents because a lot of us know on the surface about the term 40 acre and a mule, right? But we don't always know where that actually came from and who was involved and was it ever really said and was it ever really about to be implemented and all of those things. Michelee, what did you know about, like, when did you first hear 40 acre and a mule, and what did you know about the actual history of these 40 acre documents?
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry, we breaking up a little bit. I didn't hear your question. Did you ask me something?
Yeah, I was I was asking, when did you first hear
I'm
about 40
breaking up
acres?
when I first heard about 40 acres and a mule. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, of course, when we learn about the Emancipation Proclamation, and after uh, our enslaved ancestors were freed, they were, well, during who was that? Who was that? George Washington? Was that? I mean, not George Washington.
Lincoln or General
Who
Sherman?
was that? What was I about to say? But anyway, so someone, basically they were promised,
Mm-hmm.
right? Were promised 40 acres and a mule. Well, that's what was proposed, right? And it was never actually, they never actually went through with it. And yeah, the documents though, that we were discussing,
Yeah.
we're really getting into like what it actually meant. I want you to actually break it down, because I didn't finish reading all of the documents like you did. I know we had them as assignments, in school reading, but it's been a little while for me. But I know
Mm-hmm.
you really got to dig
Yeah.
into
So
it.
I read through the
So
whole
tell us
thing.
what class.
Yeah, I was putting the show
Who
notes together and I was reading through everything. And it was like the 40 Acre Documents is this, really, it's in the archives of, the US, and it's interviews that were taking place between General Sherman, his men, and a select few black preachers who were chosen to speak on behalf of the black community. And this meeting was held on a boat off the coast of Savannah, called the Nevada, around between January 9th, 1865, and like January 9th through January 16th of 1865. And it was General Sherman and his men conducting interviews with these pastors of black churches, these black pastors, and they were questioning if they, what they would do if they were free. Did they understand all the components of the Civil War and what was happening, of, the rebels of the Confederacy, how they felt about, being, left alone, and did they feel like they can take care of themselves once free? And what you hear from the person that's being interviewed, because from those pastors and elders of those churches, you had one guy who was chosen, Pastor Frazier, who was like the representative voice being interviewed to represent all of these pastors who also represented their communities and, their congregations. And what some of the questions were in the line of, do you understand, the Confederacy, and how do you feel about them? And they were like, well, they are rebels against the United States, and they were given an opportunity to secede from the Union, and they took it, and they should be looked on as traitors. And they also asked him, do you believe that if freed, that African Americans, or the Negro people, like they called us colored in that era, so do you believe that colored people would be able to take care of themselves, if freed? And he was saying, yes, we would be able to take care of ourselves if we're given, access to land and farm, and access to be able to sell the items that we grow and be a part of the economy. We would definitely be able to take care of ourselves, feed ourselves, house ourselves. And so, just to add to the narrative that we weren't just helpless. And what it does is it gives you a breakdown of every person who was being spoken to when they were freed, how long they had been freed. Some of them had been able to work and purchase their own freedom. Some of them had just been freed, when the Union Army arrived. And so a lot of different aspects of people, some of them were, born free. So it was a lot of different experiences of these Black men that were being interviewed, but their scope was, pretty much in sync with one another. They asked, one of the important questions that was asked is, if given the opportunity, would you rather live isolated amongst yourselves as, Black communal, like on a reservation where you guys can, just be amongst yourselves, or blended in with white people? And majority of everyone, aside from one person, said we would like to be, separated and on our own, because we understand the bias and bigotry that still exists. So we believe we will be more successful if we are left to our own, resources, because of that attitude is going to take some time to go away, right? So we'd rather not put ourselves in the position where we are surrounded by, this energy that's negative toward us. And a lot of so what Sherman actually promised was, in South Carolina and Georgia, there are these sea islands. And he was promising that on those islands and in certain areas on the mainland, that land would be given to Black people in clusters. And if, multiple families want to house or reside in one cluster together, then they would be allotted no more than 40 acres for each family unit. I don't know where the mule part came in, because I didn't read that, but the 40 acres was there, right? Because it was how they would divide the land amongst more than one family who wanted to reside in the same vicinity of one another, and give them enough property to actually do their agricultural work or do whatever it is that they were going to do to make money, whether it be, being a mechanic or a carpenter or, a blacksmith. And they also wanted to make sure, and they were saying, okay, so if we do this, how do we ensure that, the Black people will represent or, be friendly to the U.S. government? And what the pastor was telling him is that Black people had signed up and voluntarily wanted to be a part of the military, and that by virtue of, being in the military, showing their allegiance to the U.S. government in that way, and that, if everything is on the up and up, everybody will be satisfied. If we're given this land, if we're allotted these islands, if we are able to grow our own food and take care of ourselves, we will be here and be able to represent ourselves. And one of the things that I did like as a highlight to this whole thing is that a lot of these churches in their names were named after Africa. There was the first African church. There was the second African church, the third African church. And so I'm saying that because there is this narrative that Black people coming out of enslavement or being indoctrinated into the U.S. system, being enslaved for that long, had lost all connection with Africa. And that just isn't true. As soon as we were able to educate ourselves, as soon as we were able to create our own institutions, a lot of us rushed to name those institutions after Africa, to include Africa in the name of a lot of those organizations. And it's important for us to understand that that is a reality that that always existed. So it was just interesting reading through the whole document of knowing, okay, that Sherman actually didn't just make this statement, right? He didn't just say it in a field one day like it's taught in the history books, but he actually sat down and met with people about what the reparations should look like. And what eventually happened, why it didn't happen, is that the Congress when they actually, you know, voted on how things would go, they didn't agree to the having Black people be isolated. They did blend us into already existing white communities, which was a deterrent to a lot of what we were trying to do and accomplish. And then they also, you know, didn't allot the land. They gave access to land, but then made the people pay rent and then giving an option to buy the land afterwards. So it was like a rent to own, if possible, situation, but it wasn't what Sherman had agreed upon from the beginning, that the land would be given and it would be allotted to people in the way that he had stated before. So what actually happened, again, just to repeat, instead of the land being allotted, Black people were given access to land that they could rent. And so it wasn't really the same opportunity of ownership and also of being able to manifest our own society and our own communities, which even in the path of that, we still found a way to do it, not soon after. And so it just speaks to how resilient we are, but how long, this is 1865, just how long this reparations discussion has been going on. And to speak a little bit more to that and the history of how that works, we are going into our deconstructed segment of the show, where we break down something in the media, whether it be a film, a TV show, or music, and talk about how that relates to us as a people, how we can engage with that in our social activism playbook, how we can learn from these things, or what we should be peeping that exists in our media. So Ava DuVernay's 13th, which is a documentary that can be found on Netflix, is very easy. Everybody has access to Netflix. So 13th is in reference to the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are very important to Black people. The 13th Amendment essentially, technically, abolished enslavement in this country, but there's a reason that I say technically. The 14th Amendment gave us our citizenship, and the 15th Amendment supposedly gave Black people the right to vote, even though we needed the Voter Rights Act to strengthen that. So going back to the 13th, in this documentary, what Ava DuVernay presents to us is the full article that is written in the 13th Amendment. And what it says is that, you know, essentially enslavement should not be legal in the United States aside from someone being convicted of a crime, right? So what that is saying is that prison is not a new form of slavery. It is slavery. It says it right in the document. It doesn't try to hide it. Now, it does say it in legalese. So if you've ever read the U.S. Constitution and any of the amendments, you will, you know, feel like your brain is about to explode because they do all this double talk. If you've read any law, and it's just ridiculous just how convoluted they make everything sound. But in that sentence where they say slavery, you know, people shall not be able to own people as slaves in the United States aside from them being convicted of a crime. And that is telling you that in this new line of us having this prison industrial complex, and when you look at the population of prisons, you see a lot of Black people. And when we talked about, you know, needing Black DAs and prosecutors to, you know, make sure that we get lesser sentences, it speaks to all of this, because essentially what we're doing is we're sending ourselves back into slavery. We're giving up, because when you get out of prison, a lot of the times you lose a lot of your rights as a citizen, even after you serve your sentence. And so all of that has to be considered in this long conversation, and it ties into that long conversation about reparations, because are we only talking about reparations as it related to our enslavement and involuntary servitude during the, the 16th and 17th centuries, or are we still talking about the things that we are suffering as Black people in this country today? Michelee, are you back with us? Can you hear me? Can we hear you?
So you hear me now, right?
I got you. So what you got to say about 13?
You hear me now?
I got you.
Know me right now.
We having a one of our technical difficult days. They happen almost every week, and this is, I know Michelee wanted to actually go in on this topic because she has a lot to share. So what I'll do is, since I don't think she can hear me, is I'll just can you hear me? Can you say something about 13?
You hear me now, right?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. It's late, so I'm hearing your questions really late. But yeah, so we're on. Yeah, we finally on. I'm not frozen anymore. Okay, great. But yeah, I'm being hated on by some unseen forces. Anyway, to go on with the conversation. But yeah, we're talking about our deconstructed on the 13th, the documentary 13th. This documentary, I mean, woo. Like you touched on, the 13th documentary, basically was setting us free, supposedly, right? And
Right.
this documentary just uncovers just the prison industrial system and focuses on that, and showing how we basically are not free. Basically once you enter that. And Alexander was one person in that, shown in that documentary. She had the book, what she wrote, The New Jim Crow. And I'm actually rereading that book now. And just this, I mean, this is in my adulthood. I'm learning about all of these things, and where I'm from, a lot of young people, young and old or whoever, get caught up in the system, through, just issue of criminality in certain neighborhoods. So we know a lot of people. I think most of us know at least someone, or know someone who has family members in prison now. And just learning that, especially when we're talking about with dealing with politics and voting and things like that, people are disenfranchised once they, you know what I mean, have been convicted. And I've seen recently, like, there are new, like, politicians, I guess, who are trying to, or people, in communities, pushing for people to get their rights back and things like that, after going through the system. But this documentary really just, shed light on just the process, and how deep it goes, and that, slavery didn't really end. It just transformed into something else. And we saw, the beginning, of, well, during Reconstruction and things, right after the Civil War, after, people were set free from slavery. This, I mean, you see a big boom in, people being, swept into this new criminal justice system, into prisons. And it basically is slavery all over again. So I mean, we just really have to pay attention to that. It's not over. Slavery has not ended, because it was an economic system. These people are serious about their money.
And we have to pay attention to all the laws that magically popped up on the books,
Exactly.
after the 13th Amendment. Like, if there is a group of Black men standing for an extended period of time, that is now called loitering, and now that is a jailable offense. And people, I remember my grandmother, she used to always talk about the chain gang, the chain gang, the chain gang. And like the chain gang literally was when they would arrest people, put them in chains, link them together, and have them working in fields. And this, the chain gang lasted all the way until, you know, at least the terminology until my grandmother's generation in that timeline, which was the generation that birthed the baby boomers. I don't think they really had a name for those people, but it was just like, okay, they actually had us in chains, right? Check. Okay. That sounds eerily similar to enslavement. They had us working in fields. Okay. Check. That sounds eerily similar to enslavement.
Right.
They, you know what I mean? We were like out in the fields chained to each other. And like, even during enslavement, we weren't chained in the fields.
In the field.
Like, it was even worse. And so it was just very interesting. Like, there were so many laws. Like, look at the black codes. And this is even before Jim Crow, right? Jim Crow didn't start until after Reconstruction was over. These things happened like right before the Reconstruction period began on into Reconstruction. And so, go ahead.
Oh no, you can go on and finish what you were saying.
No, I was just saying these laws that were created were at the disadvantage mostly of black men trying to make sure that, you know, they weren't ever going to be competition. And this is economically because we were viable, because during Reconstruction we were gaining political offices, we were creating these neighborhoods. Like I alluded to before, when Congress didn't agree to give us the 40 acres, we still found a way around that to still build up so many successful economic communities. That goes back to the lynching topic that we talked about yesterday, where the lynching wasn't out of hate. It wasn't out of just plain disdain for black people. It was out of economic jealousy, because a lot of these white communities that were right next to black communities weren't thriving as much.
Right. And so we see also how like the propaganda, all of that, you know, popped up. The Birth of a Nation, that did a lot, you know, and that wasn't the only one, but the Birth of a Nation just showed, you know, black people, black men in particular, as criminals, as, you know, they're savages. They need to be, you know, punished. They need to be locked up. Exactly. And so it kind of like just tagged them as criminals and justify, basically it was a way to kind of justify them, you know, sweeping them into this system. And it's just so crazy, because we see a lot of that propaganda as a, you know, and we, even to today, it still lingers, you know, today is black men being seen as a threat.
Michelee, did you know that one of the reasons that black people are being like, it's a negative connotation of black people and watermelons is because that in the South, I forget which state, but I'll look it up and I'll put it in the description so that you guys can look at it later. But black people were making a lot of money selling watermelon. We were growing and selling watermelon, and it was impacting this black community so heavily that the white people started, you know, trying to bash black people, saying that we eat watermelons and are lazy. And all we do is sit around all day and eat watermelon. But the truth of the matter was we were growing and selling watermelon and making crazy amounts of money that they couldn't get a piece of. And so with their access to media, they started to depict us as like buffoons and just eating watermelon and being silly because of economics. Which is why, you know, the tie-in to this talking about us wanting reparations, it goes beyond just enslavement, right? It goes to all of the different economic advancements that we would make every generation, every so often. And then just different things that would come in when you talked about propaganda, different propaganda that was used to present black people in a certain light in a demeaning light, in a light that actually conditioned the minds of other white people who would have otherwise supported, because they were buying our watermelons too. Like, and so
Right.
just that imagery became so depicted that I saw it in, you know, Looney Tunes cartoons that were still being aired on regular TV when I was growing up. Those things just became taboo, like within the last 20, 25 years or so.
Right.
And so it's crazy how much we don't know and how much we need to know. One of the things I also wanted to make sure that people know about is that I know in Georgia, and I learned about this in Dr. Umoja's class too, that it was on the law books that it was impossible for a Black woman to be raped. Like, there was no such thing as raping a Black woman, because she always wanted sex. That was their thought process, and that this was written in the legal books. So white men had free reign to rape Black women anytime they wanted, and then they hung Black men for the lie about them raping white women. So can you see that this is projection? Who were the rapists?
Right.
Like, they were so fixated on rape for some reason that they put it in the law books at the disadvantage of Black women, and then at the disadvantage of Black men would just kill us and castrate us at the possibility of us even engaging and looking a certain way at a white woman. And so all of these images, all of these things, all of these lives lost, all of these traumatic instances, all of these funds lost, all of the access to funds that were lost, all of that builds into the case for reparations, which is, you know, our topic for the culture, to talk about the long struggle of reparations, the long struggle for it. And like, my view on reparations, honestly, after we didn't get it with Sherman, and I believe reparations is not just a Black American issue, right? Anybody who experienced the transatlantic slave experience deserves reparations. Haitians, Martinicans deserve reparations from France. All of South America deserves reparations from Portugal and Spain.
Right.
The English owe reparations to Jamaica and all those other islands, and we are definitely owed from the United States.
Right. But the thing is with that, though, like, there has not even been an effort, like, by America, by the United States of America, to, they haven't apologized. There have been African countries involved in the transatlantic slave trade that have, their leaders have come out, in recent years to apologize to, the descendants of the people who were stolen,
right,
from the shores of Africa and brought over and enslaved. And why has America not made that they don't, like, they won't even, we can't talk about reparations if they won't even acknowledge it, because, and I think that's done on purpose. They are purposely avoiding the conversation. Right now is really in our face. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about it. They've really been discussing it on the floors, in these political arenas. But I'm wondering how serious is going to be taken, if it's not even spoken about honestly by the leaders, in U.S. politics. So what do you think about that? Like,
that's my thing. My position is, I honestly am for everybody who is fighting for reparations, right? I am standing in solidarity with your quest for it and your fight to say that it is a valid argument. But personally, I'm not waiting for it.
Yeah.
I don't care if it happens or not, honestly. I think
Right.
of it in the same situation of if somebody shoots me in the leg and they intentionally meant to shoot me,
Mm-hmm.
and my and the doctor tells me, or somebody shoots me and I wait for the person who shot me to harm me to call the ambulance.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's my dumb fault. At that point,
Right.
I'm the dumb person, right?
Right.
It's still that person's fault that I am injured, right? They injured me. I didn't injure myself, but if I don't take care of myself after the injury, and that all I am saying is, no, I'm not going to do it. They owe me.
Yes.
They
Yes.
need to call the ambulance. They need to ride in the ambulance with me. They need to pay the insurance. They need to pay the hospital bill. And then they need to do my physical therapy for me. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, they can't do the physical therapy for you. If you want to walk again, you're going to have to do it yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter whose fault it was, who was to blame. There is accountability on you, even as the person who has been victimized, to do something for yourself, even though you didn't put yourself in that position. And so
Right.
as a descendant of powerful Black people, that I've seen us bounce back from, we built Black Wall Street after enslavement. We had people during the time of Reconstruction build organizations and create banks, and not only just businesses but enterprises. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just, and I keep harping on this because now that everybody knows about Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, they think it was the only one. No, it
Right.
wasn't.
Right. It
It
was
was
several.
it was
Mm-hmm.
so many across the United States that everywhere we went, we
Mm-hmm.
we advanced economically, socially beyond the people that were right next to us because we had strategy. We
Right.
had a collective thought about how to do economics. We were cooperative. We kept those African aspects in everything that we did. So
Definitely.
I am of the mindset that we can do it again. The reparations that I want is to be left the hell alone.
So, bro, that's the thing, though. So I'm totally for reparations. I'm down, like fighting for it and everything. And I definitely hear where you're coming from, like, on that accountability, and also knowing that we can do it again. We have the potential to rebuild everything all over again. But just to what you were speaking to about, the scenario you gave, the hypothetical situation, if I get shot by on them to pay me back. Yes, we are owed. It's like this. There's like an entitlement that we
Mm-hmm.
have, and it's like rightfully so. Like you feel away, and you were victimized. You know what I mean, by the systems,
True.
even to this day. But where we have to stress, like, what are we going to do about our situation if we know we're still dealing with the same people? Laws, like we talked about earlier, laws being changed, amendments being, added to the Constitution, this and that. These are things that needed to happen to improve our situations, but we didn't change the hearts and minds of these people. We just put the pressure on them to get things that we want and need. And so that's the important part. Like I think nowadays it's like almost like a victim mentality, and that paralyzes us. We have
Right.
to understand
That's
the
my point.
power that we have. Yeah, we have the potential. And oh my God, I have to share this a video with you. I just watched. It was a small segment shown on how land laws are affecting people, like mostly like Black people who they're losing their land. And this
Mm.
was shown, I want to say it was like, it was in the Carolinas, I believe, or on the coast of Georgia, like that
The Sea
area
Island.
where you were just, yeah, where you were talking, exactly, you were talking about the sea islands on the coast of like Georgia and Carolinas and stuff. Oh, it was on Hilton Head. It was talking about Hilton Head because it was majority Black owners, and like how you were just talking about, straight out of slavery, Black people were doing for themselves. They were creating businesses. They had schools and factories, all kinds of things, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like my family, my grandmother. comes from Louisiana, and I know that her parents left land to, you know, all of their siblings. And so I just learned, I've been questioning my family about it, you know, trying to get more information, just, you know, as I'm becoming more aware, just trying to keep that in the family, you know what I mean? Since I heard about it, I'm just trying to, you know, really take control over it, because a lot of people don't think about it. We don't look at like land and, you know, ownership as something, you know, to really keep in the family, because we run across a lot of different issues. But this documentary, or you know, this small segment was talking about, it was highlighting like certain families who were losing their property, because the people who left it, their family members who left it, they were like sharecroppers and stuff, but they prioritized buying land, right, and left it to their family. However, they didn't create wills. They didn't designate like exactly who. So now there's something called like heir, is considered like heir property or something like that. So the heirs of the, you know, and so it basically divided up into a bunch of, you know, for a bunch of people. And so certain members can sell off their portion of the land. And so other people are there taking advantage of that. There was a man on there, older white guy. He was like, you know, he would be at those auctions. He would be the only person there. First of all, right? This land is up for sale. It's at an auction. He's buying up these people's land, $2,000, $1,000. You know, people are getting kicked off of their land that their family worked hard for. It was a woman, she was like probably in her 90s or something, and she had to move off of that property, you know, because, you know, these people were buying up, the man bought the land for the wood, the timber that was on the land. He immediately chopped off all that wood and sold it off. We're not looking at like that's how you build wealth. Those families, had they known, they could have been making money off of that land that already belonged to them. But like that just goes to show, like, it's just so much we have to learn. And those of us now, a lot of us, like I said, I know for my family, we have land in the family. Everybody I talk to pretty much, you know, and it's mostly like in the South. A lot of times, you know, because our, you know, relatives were in the South and eventually fled, you know, that caused that great migration, all the horrors of the South, everything, all the violence and stuff going on in the South. It caused a lot of people to move, you know, west. Like my family, a lot of my friends that I grew up with, people that I know on the West Coast, their family came from the same regions that my family came from, you know, so we see this migration. A lot of people from Mississippi, their descendants are up in Chicago and places like that now. But we still have things like, you know, like property and stuff. A lot of us still have stuff like left to us, and we have to figure out how to use that, you know what I mean? Because that's how you start generational wealth. We have to, you know, just wise up and just really get hip to what's really going on, because other people are taking advantage of it. And who's going to be to blame? We just, you know, education is key. We have to know.
My thing is, we cannot just sit around being victims. And
Yes.
in the case of that scenario, like my analogy, like I said, wanting the person who shot you to be in the ambulance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is insane.
Yes.
Right? Like, why would I want them anywhere near me? Like,
exactly.
I almost just want to be left alone. Like, if you
I
allow
totally
us
feel you on that.
to be and build with what we have been shown to be capable of, I believe we can build up more Black Wall Streets than ever existed before, and actually hold on to it and not have it being blown up, not have it be destroyed, not have any other of these things happen, and just let us build, because we are building right now. This generation is understanding more about economics, more about entrepreneurship, more about a lot of these things. And we have organizations that are here promoting, you know, buying Black and banking Black and doing all these things. So we have to keep that momentum. I'm not saying don't say that we aren't owed reparations. Yes.
Right.
But honestly, anything that they offer us is going to be a low ball offer.
Right.
The amount that they actually owe us, there's no way that they can actually pay that
at all.
Right? And so, and the worst thing that, in my opinion, that could happen is if They give us something, and then they believe and they hold it over our heads and say, well, we gave you that, and now you can't complain anymore. Right? Or we gave you that, and now, shut up and forget about it.
So, my thing on that, though, I feel like there should be sort of like an unconditioning or like a reconditioning of just like our mindset as it relates to us, as a people, because if they do, just say, hypothetically, they issue a check, right? Next year for reparations, right? And I do believe it would be something like, here, we gave it to you. Now what? Because a lot of people, I hear a lot of Black people even saying, they're not for reparations because, we just gonna give it right back to them and all kind of stuff. Like, I don't care. Hey, if you feel like that, you don't want your reparations, pass it over here. I'll take it, right?
Yeah, ain't nobody said we ain't taking it over here.
Right. But for those though, because there is a lot of concern of like, what will we do with it if it does come in the form of a check or something? That's up to you, right? But I feel like there should be a conditioning though for us to realize, and like you said, and what we're doing with the social activism playbook is, taking this blueprint, because like we talked about, our ancestors have done it. Our elders, even elders who are still alive, they have seen it firsthand, have been involved in it. And like you said, with us now, I really appreciate our generation. A lot of us are correcting a lot of history, because I think at a certain point people got comfortable maybe, or got like, well, we have access. We have more access than our parents did, than previous generations did. And so they felt more comfortable. Then you have some people who maybe wanted to shelter us. I hear a lot of, elders saying how they wanted to shelter us from all the horrible things. But this stuff is important for us to know so that we don't continue to repeat it. I feel like we will take it more seriously, when we take over. Because now we're the age, our generation right now, we're getting in these positions trying to change things. We're trying to take over, our family.
You see the same thing in parenting though, right?
Yeah.
You see people who grew up poor and they get a little access and they spoil their children, and it makes them horrible, right? Because they don't appreciate anything. The same thing happens to us as Black people when our grandparents were so traumatized that they didn't want to tell their children or us the realities of what they actually went through. It set us up to trip and fall into the exact same things,
because we'll be able to identify it and be like, no, I know what you're doing, because why is it that like when we were in college, amongst a lot of my friends, I was seen as too radical, or like, no, everything is all right. And I'm like, I wasn't even that bad. I don't consider myself that bad, but I was just talking to people about like realizing what's going on. Don't just think because they're smaller in your face and you can sit in the same rooms and, at the board room with them. Don't think that it's over. This is like, even with slavery, it like we talked about earlier with the prison industrial system, it's just a new form. These systems have not changed. They just, they haven't gone away. They just changed. They just took on a different form. And so we always have to be aware of what's going on, but also be very involved and not feel that like, well, everything is, is out of my control, or feel that everything is over, because it's definitely not.
Exactly. And I'll say this, like, I was right there with you in that view. Now, I'll admit, at a point in time, I was extra radical. I was in your face about it, right? But then as I learned tact, right, and how to present it to people in love, I was still seen as too radical or rocking the boat a little bit too much. Even just the name of this organization, African Unity Initiative. Why is it African Unity? Does it only have to be African Unity? I was like, bro, come on. What are we talking about? I had somebody say, why is it not called Global Unity? I'm not talking about global unity.
We're talking about us.
Global Africans. Like, we talking about the global African perspective. Yes, that. But I'm not talking, I don't want to be the leader of, some type of pan-Asian movement. That's up to them. Let them lead their own thing. They have their own issues. They can
we focus?
Exactly. I will support them in what they're fighting for, but I won't be the leader and they can't be the leader of what we're doing over here. We can collaborate when the time is right, like the Black Panther Party for self-defense aligned themselves with people in the Communist Party, but they also understood that every line in of what they're fighting for doesn't represent every line in what we're fighting for. And they can't be the spokespeople for us. We have to speak for ourselves, and we can't be ashamed of speaking up for ourselves. We cannot look at this like, oh man, oh shucks, they're going to be offended if I stand up for myself. I don't care how they feel.
Exactly.
Because I am doing this for the right reasons. I know that my people need this. I have a little bit of knowledge, especially coming from where I come from. I know what we didn't get taught. So any little thing that I have gotten, I'm going to try my best to give it back, and give it back in a way that it will be received from people who grew up the way that I did, right? Everybody is going to read the research paper. So let's do this. We
got to know how to feed it to them. Yeah. And that's the thing. So this will tie back in something I wanted to say when they was hating on me, and I got frozen up. But going back to, with the political situation and voting, I feel that like a lot of people use, our ancestors died for us to vote. We have to vote. And how people talk to some of our people about voting, and like we discussed the distrust in the system, and a lot of people just don't want to hear it because we're not seeing results. But the thing we have to realize is that it takes work, it takes dedication. We have to sacrifice. There are going to be some luxuries that we've been used to now, that we will potentially have to give up if we want freedom. Like, this stuff is not going to be easy. We know that the people that we're fighting against don't want to give it up easily. What makes you think that we're just going to, have it just fall in our lap? It's going to take sacrifice. But at the same time, I feel that when we talk about voting, because we have to actually put in work, we have to participate in the system, we have to learn their game. We want to stay there because we talk about people migrating, going back to Africa, wherever in Africa, or going, people don't want to do that. A lot of people don't want to do that. So you're choosing to stay here. You're choosing to play in this game. If you're going to play in their game, you have to learn the rules. Right? They speak in a different language. They know what to do. They're like I talked about that group, Alec. And they know the rules, right? So they know that they have the right rules, with that stand your ground law and stuff like that. Like, these are things that they're handing them. We have to know how to put on the same level. But if we know, like those of us who do know better and know the political system, and we want more of our people to participate, we have to do a better job at like communicating that to them, and maybe sometimes even feeding them like, okay, this is what we want, this is what we need. That critical mass we talked about though. And those of us, everybody won't read, the research. Everyone won't be doing, we won't know the whole system. I don't know everything, but what I do know, I'll try to educate my friends and family on, and okay, you don't have faith in it, but hey, I'm saying this, vote for me then. Vote for me. Okay,
one of the things I want to do with this platform as it builds is, once we get to a certain number, start a book club and start giving out actual books that we will read together.
And I like that.
Discuss them once, set a timeline. First start out with a short book and try to do, a chapter a day. And then after a week, we can come back and do a review of that book and then talk about the lessons that were in there. So it's a, like you said, with the critical mass piece, understanding that let's say we start getting thousands of viewers a day, right? Out of those thousands of viewers, it's only going to be a select few who want to actually be a part of the book club, and they will get that much more and be that much more invested and involved in what it is that we're doing. And that's great. And then everybody else, we can do something else for them. We could start a film club. We could start a music club, whatever. However you get information, there's an avenue for you, because that's
Right.
another one of the reasons that in the past episodes we've been trying to elevate and not overly criticize artists who are trying their best to put out information through their way of getting information out, right? Because everybody isn't going to read a full research paper. Everybody isn't going to the conference where people are presenting that research. Everybody isn't interested in watching documentaries. Sometimes I'll get the information because I will watch a biopic. Maybe a biopic is a little too serious. So maybe if I put it in a song, it'll reach that other person. Maybe if it's in a poem, maybe if it's presented in so many different ways that it is going to reach somebody, no matter how it is that they learn, it's there. And that's
because we learn it. We have different styles. Yeah, we have different styles of learning. Like I know for me, I do like I appreciate things put in like in an artistic form. I like to be shown, how to do something by hand. I need somebody side by side with me doing something, but we can't just be, just cynical, and just doubt some things, you know what I mean? Just question some things, think critically about it, do some research, or at least trust the people who do the research. You know what I mean? Read the information. We have to actually believe it. And I mean, we have to do the work.
It's like that fine balance between confidence and arrogance. You don't want to tip over into arrogance, because then you really aren't, helping anybody else. But confidence allows you to be productive, right? Arrogance, you're up in the air and you usually are, preparing yourself for the fall. But the same thing with a healthy distrust, it prompts you to be active. Whereas if you tip over into cynicism, you become more critical of everything around you. And then when you actually start to look at yourself, you're not moving at all. All you're doing is pointing the finger at everybody else on what they're doing or not doing. And you're not doing anything but pointing all of their flaws out. And you have, leveled yourself invalid, because now you don't do anything but talk about what everybody else is doing.
What they ain't doing, what she ain't doing.
They're not doing enough. Like, who cares? What are you doing? Because if you were doing, you wouldn't have enough time. It's just like, I remember like when people are praying, people are like, oh, that person didn't even close their eyes when you prayed. Well, if your eyes were closed, how would you know?
You wouldn't even know they weren't praying.
If you're doing your part, you don't have that much time to notice what other people are or are not doing, because you're in your lane playing your role. And so long as you're carrying your weight, you will be satisfied with the progression that you see you and the people around you making. I surround myself around people that I like to talk to, that I like to do things with, and I focus my attention on those positive things. Doesn't mean that we completely neglect the things that are happening. We see what's happening. We see what we need to be critical of and have that healthy distrust to keep us researching and reading and understanding what's happening. But in order to be active, to be a part of the result, to be a part of the solution. But if you're just pointing fingers, you might get arthritis, but you're not going to get anything else. And so,
because you ask them for the solution, and it's like, well, what's your solution? What are you going to do? Even now, we started off the show talking about Kamala Harris. Now, in that position, and we're going to, okay, you don't like her, okay, for whatever reason. And a lot of times people haven't actually done research themselves. They're just, we're talking about listening about, exactly. You only retweeting memes and, little clickbait articles and stuff like that, where we're not even developing opinions and, judgments on our own. And this can be really dangerous. And I think they, like whoever wants to fool us, you know, and with anything. They know this about us now, and like with all of these distractions, all of these ways, you know, for people to see and hear what other people are saying all the time, hear other people's opinions on it, is just creating like a bigger problem with, you know, with groupthink basically. And it can get dangerous when the, you know, basically when you just get a bunch of criticism and nobody's actually moving, or you're not listening or following the people who are moving. Because we have Black leaders now, you know, who people would rather not listen to, you know, based on rumors or based on, you know, something that somebody else said. We're not doing our own research. It's not a healthy criticism, you know, as you say. We're just being extra critical, just doubting everything, not believing anything, trying to read between, you know, all the lines, but you creating lines. You like, you done went beyond to where it's not even, you don't even see what's reality. You don't even know which world you in, you
Too
know.
much
And so
of
it's,
a good
yeah,
thing is a bad thing. Too much.
exactly. We got to balance. We got to find that balance and
Too much
actually
work.
start
Some of
making
y'all
some
need
moves.
rest, and
I'm
that's
telling you,
just it,
take a nap.
right? And so, I mean, just to put everything and put a button on everything, right? From Kamala Harris being the first, you know, VP nominee, to Shirley Chisholm and all the advocacy and the work and the strength and the power that she spoke with, from understanding the realities of the 40 Acre Documents to that long fight and struggle of reparations and understanding the 13th Amendment and everything that goes into what that is and what that was. There, the common theme is we have to be active. We have to know what our ancestors have already built and continue to build on it and be encouraged by their bravery, their courage, and their just persistence, and keep that energy going. And instead of pointing fingers outwardly and being at that level of cynicism, be have a healthy level of distrust and know what's going on around you, but want to be a part of the solution, want to be a part of the result. Have the solution in mind, or at least an end goal when you formulate your criticism, to know where you're going, to know which direction you want to get to eventually, and find yourself to be a part of that solution. One part of the solution is the work of African Unity Initiative, where we are definitely on the ground in real life, in real time, touchable outside of COVID. So now it's virtual tangible, but still tangible ways to get involved, right? So if you want to know more, visit africanunity.us. It's everywhere on your screen. It's scrolling down in the ticker, is up in the corner at the top of the page.
You see us.
And it's on the screen. And if you want to see our activity or reach out to the organization, follow us on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all at African Unity Initiative, or all at African Unity. Is very easy. You know, you don't have to spell initiative and try to figure out, you know, is it 3 I's or is it 4? We took all of that guesswork out for you. So it's just at African Unity. And Michelee, let them know where they can, with the K, definitely, for the whole diaspora. Let them know where they can find you.
Oh yeah, my website is mishmashworld.com, where you can find my handmade goods, and you can find me on social media at Michie the Maker. And I want to also, before we end this, we were talking about a lot of powerful Black women, and we left out a major detail when we were speaking about our beloved Miss Ida B. Wells, and she was a founding member of the NAACP. And that was a very piece of information, a very important piece of information that we just, you know, kind of skipped over, you know, yesterday. But we caught up. You know, we got to get you caught up on that, and still look into her, look into all the people that we highlight, all the organizations that we highlight. You know, to just be more informed. And you know, like we've been speaking about what we're doing at African Unity Initiative, we are creating this, with this platform, this show right here, ASAP. We are creating a social activism playbook where we're trying to feed it to you, right? Our ancestors already left us the blueprints, our elders, they've done the work. We can still pick it up and reuse those same things. It's like fine china. They just ate off of it once. We can pick it back up, and just, hey. So we're trying to give it to you. So continue to follow us, like, share, comment, when we're streaming live, and subscribe to the page to keep following us for more information. But that's about it for me. Yeah.
We appreciate you guys for tuning in every day. We are going to definitely be here with more interesting topics, with so much more to talk about, so many more people. And I love the fact of how we do this, because we introduce new people as well as people that we've heard of, but not really in the detail that they actually deserve. So that's what we are here to do. We love you guys.